Rusted copper coated the back of my throat. That was my final, useless thought before a delivery truck folded my sedan in half, crushing my chest against the steering wheel. All because I spent a year trying to save my roommate from a billionaire's gilded trap. But when I gasped and my eyes snapped open, I wasn't dying on wet asphalt. I was sitting on my lumpy mattress, 3 years in the past. Gemma walked out of our cramped bathroom, holding a plastic stick with 2 pink lines. This time, I'm not saving her. I'm going to watch her burn. My lungs expanded. It wasn't the sharp, agonizing tear of punctured tissue. It was just air, thick, humid, smelling faintly of cheap citrus air freshener, and the stale water sitting in our clogged sink. I stared at my hands. There was no glass embedded in the knuckles, no blood pooling in the lifelines. I pressed my thumbs into my palms until the nails bit hard enough to hurt. The pain was dull, grounding, real. "Harper," the voice was high, slightly nasal, vibrating with a manic energy that made my stomach pitch. I looked up. Gemma stood in the doorway of our cramped bathroom. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting a harsh, sickly yellow glow over her pale skin. She was wearing my oversized gray sweater, the one I had let her borrow last night. Her mascara was clumped, a little smeared at the corners of her eyes, but her gaze was wired, electric. In her trembling right hand, she held a plastic pregnancy test. I knew what was on it, 2 glaring pink lines. "I'm late," she whispered. Though it wasn't a secret, she stepped forward, her bare feet sticking slightly to the cracked linoleum floor. "I took 3 of them. They're all positive." My brain short-circuited, scrambling to overlay this moment with the nightmare I had just woken up from. In my previous life, this was the exact second my own destruction began. In that life, I had jumped off the bed. I had hugged her. I had asked what she wanted to do. And when she said she was keeping it to force Preston Cole to marry her, I had spent every dime, every ounce of my sanity, and eventually my life, trying to pull her out of the meat grinder that was the Cole family. I had dragged her to clinics. I had warned her about Preston's violent temper, about his family's army of lawyers who devoured poor girls for sport. My reward: Gemma told Preston I was trying to kill his heir. She testified against me in court when they sued me for harassment. They froze my bank accounts. They got me fired. And then a truck ran a red light on a quiet, rainy Tuesday. I blinked. The buzzing of the bathroom light seemed deafening now. "Well?" Gemma demanded, her voice cracking. "Say something. Do you know what this means?" She wasn't looking at me for comfort. She was looking at me for validation. She wanted me to confirm the delusion swelling in her chest. I stood up. My knees popped. I felt heavy, anchored to the cheap carpet. I walked over to her and looked down at the plastic wand. "It means you're pregnant," I said. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, flat, devoid of the panic that had consumed me last time. Gemma laughed. It was a sharp, grating sound. "It means I'm a Cole, Harper. Preston is going to lose his mind. We're going to get married. Do you know how much trust funds for Cole babies are worth? Millions. God, I have to go shopping. I can't wear this cheap crap when I tell him." She tossed the test onto my unmade bed, already turning toward her closet, yanking hangers across the metal rod. The metal screeched. I stood there, looking at the test, resting on my faded blue quilt. I remembered the documents I had found in my past life, the ironclad, horrific contracts Preston's father made Gemma sign in her 3rd trimester. Contracts that surrendered all her parental rights. Contracts that forced her into a private, guarded psychiatric facility the moment she gave birth, diagnosing her with postpartum psychosis so the Coles could take the child and bury the mother. I had died trying to tell her. She had hated me for it. You should call him, I said. Gemma stopped digging through her closet and looked back at me, a floral blouse clutched in her fist. Right now? Why wait? I asked, forcing the corners of my mouth up into a shape that resembled a smile. It's his baby. He deserves to know. You're about to give him everything he ever wanted. She beamed. It was a radiant, greedy smile, the kind of smile someone wears right before they step off a cliff, convinced they know how to fly. You're right, she breathed. She dropped the blouse and grabbed her phone from the nightstand. I'm calling him. I walked over, picked up the pregnancy test by the very edge, and threw it in the trash can. I'll leave you to it. Big things are happening for you, Gem. The biggest, she whispered, already dialing. I walked out of the room, gently pulling the door shut behind me. The click of the latch sounded like a lock snapping into place. Not on me, on her. The walls in our apartment were paper thin. You could hear the neighbors arguing, the stray cats fighting in the alley, and every single delusion tumbling out of Gemma's mouth. I sat at the sticky kitchen table, methodically sorting through a pile of mail. Junk, bills, a flyer for a local pizza place. My hands moved steadily, but my mind was a million miles away, cataloging everything I needed to do to untangle myself from her before the blast radius reached me. Through the wall, I heard Preston pick up. His voice was muffled, but the tone was unmistakable. Bored, annoyed. What? He snapped. Even through the drywall, the arrogance in his voice made my skin crawl. Preston, Gemma cooed. She was using that high, breathy voice she reserved exclusively for men with black cards. Are you sitting down? I tuned out the exact words. I knew how the conversation went. She drops the bomb. He goes dead silent. The silence stretches so long, she starts to panic, babbling about how much they love each other. Then, the cold, calculated shift in his demeanor. He tells her not to tell anyone, that he'll send his driver to pick her up tomorrow so they can discuss their future. In my first life, I had pressed my ear to the wall, terrified for her. Today, I just tossed a coupon flyer into the recycling bin and stood up. I walked into the kitchen and opened the cupboards. We shared everything: dishes, food, cleaning supplies. I grabbed a cardboard box from the corner, leftover from a recent Amazon delivery, and started pulling my things down. The mismatched ceramic mugs I bought at a thrift store, my good chef's knife, the French press. The physical weight of the objects felt good. I wasn't saving anyone. I was just packing. Gemma emerged from her bedroom 20 minutes later. Her cheeks were flushed, and she looked slightly breathless. She stopped in the kitchen threshold, frowning at the box on the counter. What are you doing? She asked, crossing her arms. She was already adopting a new posture, shoulders back, chin tilted up, the posture of a billionaire's future wife. Packing up some of my clutter, I said smoothly, wrapping a mug in a dish towel. Why? I stopped and looked at her. I had to play this perfectly. If I showed disgust, she would get defensive. If I showed fear, she would think I was jealous. I had to feed the monster that was already eating her alive from the inside. Because, I said, leaning against the cheap Formica counter, you're pregnant with a Cole. Do you really think Preston is going to let you stay in this dump much longer? Or worse, what if he wants to stay here sometimes to avoid the paparazzi? You can't have my crap taking up half the living space. Gemma blinked, processing the logic. A slow, triumphant smile spread across her face. He did say his driver is coming tomorrow, she murmured, touching her stomach. It was perfectly, but she stroked it like it was a crystal ball. He wants to take me to the family estate to talk. He was quiet, but I think he was just in shock. He told me not to tell anyone else. He wants to protect our privacy. Exactly, I said, turning back to my box. Billionaires are obsessed with privacy. You need to clear this place out. Actually, I was thinking, my lease is up for renewal next month anyway. I should probably just start looking for my own place. Give you the whole apartment. You'll need a nursery. Her eyes widened. Really? You're moving out? There was a flicker of panic in her voice, quickly smothered by ego. She relied on me. I paid 60% of the rent, bought most of the groceries, and cleaned the bathroom. But admitting she needed me didn't fit the new narrative. It's for the best, I said, tossing a box of tea into the carton. You're entering a whole new world, Jem. You don't need a broke roommate dragging you down. You need to focus on the baby. She exhaled a long breath, nodding slowly. You're right. God, Harper, you're always so practical. I'm going to need the second bedroom for a walk-in closet anyway, until Preston buys us a house. Exactly. I grabbed the packing tape. The sharp screech of the tape pulling off the roll echoed in the small kitchen. I taped the box shut, pressing the adhesive down hard. I was leaving. I wouldn't be here when the driver came. I wouldn't be here when the lawyers started showing up. I wouldn't be here to answer the door for the private investigators who would inevitably dig through our trash. I'm going to go look at a studio apartment across town this afternoon, I told her, lifting the box. I'll be out of your hair by the weekend. Gemma didn't even look at me. She was staring at her reflection in the dirty microwave door, practicing a maternal, wealthy smile. Sounds good, she murmured. I walked out the front door. I didn't look back. 3 months passed. It was autumn now. The air in the city had turned crisp, smelling of roasted nuts from street vendors and exhaust fumes. I had moved into a tiny, overpriced studio apartment on the south side of the city. It had no dishwasher, and the heater rattled like a dying engine. But it was mine. My name was the only one on the lease. My bank account was intact. My phone didn't ring at 3 a.m. with frantic sobbing calls from a girl who didn't understand the trap she had stepped into. I was sitting in a corner booth of a quiet cafe, nursing a bitter black coffee. The dark wood of the table was scratched and worn smooth by thousands of elbows. I traced one of the gouges with my fingernail, enjoying the quiet. The bell above the door chimed. I looked up. Gemma walked in. If you didn't know her, you'd think she looked spectacular. She was wearing a cream-colored, oversized cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my car. A massive, authentic Birkin bag hung from the crook of her elbow. Her hair was professionally blown out, falling in glossy waves. But I knew her. I saw the way her shoulders hitched, stiff and defensive. I saw the sallow, grayish undertone to her skin, poorly hidden by expensive foundation. I saw her cuticles. Gemma only picked her cuticles when she was terrified. Right now, they were raw, red, and chewed down to the quick. She spotted me and hurried over, sliding into the booth opposite me. The heavy scent of Santal 33 washed over the table, entirely too strong for a Tuesday afternoon. Harper, she said, breathlessly. She didn't hug me. She just dumped the Birkin on the bench beside her. "Hey, Jem, you look nice. Cashmere?" She looked down at her sweater, as if she had forgotten she was wearing it. "Oh, yeah, Preston's mother sent over a stylist. They threw out all my old clothes." She gave a weak, breathy laugh. "Said a coal couldn't be seen in synthetic fibers." I took a slow sip of my coffee. The liquid was hot, burning the back of my throat just enough to keep me grounded. "Sounds like they're taking care of you." "They are," she insisted, entirely too fast. Her eyes darted around the cafe. A heavy black SUV was idling by the curb outside. The driver, a broad-shouldered man in a dark suit, was watching our window. "They moved me into a penthouse downtown. Preston says it's safer." "Safer from what?" I asked mildly. "The press," she said, leaning in. Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "His father is intense. He had his lawyers draft up all these documents, non-disclosure agreements, prenups, even though we aren't technically engaged yet." Here it was, the pivot point. In my past life, this was the moment I grabbed her hands. This was the moment I read the documents, saw the clauses that surrendered her medical autonomy to the Cole family patriarch, and begged her to run. I had found her a pro bono lawyer. I had fought the devil for her. I looked at her hands. Her fingers were trembling slightly against the dark wood of the table. She was pregnant, isolated, and terrified, but she was still clinging to the bag on the seat next to her like a life preserver. "Did you sign them?" I asked. Gemma swallowed hard. "I had to. They said it was just a formality, standard procedure for billionaires. Preston told me if I didn't sign, his father would cut him off. And then, how would we support the baby?" "With a job," I thought, but I didn't say it. "They have me going to this private clinic," she continued, her words spilling out in a nervous rush. "There are guards at the doors. The doctors don't even talk to me, Harper. They talk to Preston's mother. She sits in the corner during my ultrasounds. I asked for a copy of the sonogram last week, and the nurse told me Mrs. Cole retains all medical records for security reasons." Her eyes locked onto mine. There was a desperate, pleading look in them. She wanted me to tell her it was normal, or, perhaps deep down, she wanted me to tell her it wasn't, so she could blame me for ruining her fantasy. I set my coffee mug down. The ceramic clinked softly against the saucer. "Well," I said, keeping my tone light, almost dismissive, "that's how generational wealth works, right? They protect their assets. You wanted into the fortress, Jem. You can't complain that the walls are high." She recoiled, as if I had slapped her. The vulnerability in her eyes vanished, instantly replaced by the familiar, haughty defensiveness. "I'm not complaining," she snapped, her chin lifting. "I'm just adjusting. It's a lot of pressure, being the mother of the next Cole heir. I wouldn't expect you to understand." "You're right," I agreed, effortlessly. "I couldn't handle it. But you're built for this." It was exactly what she wanted to hear. The tension drained out of her neck. She offered a tight, superior smile and touched her stomach, which was now showing a distinct, rounded bump. "I am," she said. "Preston is just busy with the merger. Once the baby is born, everything will settle down." "I'm sure it will," I said. I looked out the window at the black SUV. The driver was still watching. He wasn't there to protect her from the press. He was there to make sure the incubator didn't wander off. Gemma checked the gold Cartier watch on her wrist, another chain linking her to the wall. "I have to go. My prenatal yoga instructor is coming to the penthouse." "Have fun," I said. She slid out of the booth, grabbing her Birkin. She looked down at me, sitting in my thrifted jacket, drinking cheap diner coffee. I could see the pity in her eyes. She thought I was a loser. She thought she had won the lottery. She walked out the door, the bell chiming a cheerful goodbye. I watched her climb into the back of the black SUV. The tinted windows rolled up, swallowing her whole. I took another bite of my stale biscotti. It was dry, tough, and tasted like absolute freedom. Winter hit the city like an insult. Slush piled up black and heavy in the gutters, and the wind off the river smelled of diesel and wet wool. I was standing over my rattling radiator, trying to coax some feeling back into my numb fingers, when my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. The caller ID was a string of random digits. I let it ring 3 times before hitting accept. Harper. The voice was thin. It sounded like it was coming through layers of gauze. Gemma? I asked, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. I leaned against the cheap faux granite counter, watching a pigeon huddle on my fire escape. I need to see you. The line crackled. Please, just for an hour. Preston is in Dubai for the week, and his mother is at a charity gala. I told the guards you were my sister. They'll let you up. In my previous life, I would have been in a cab before she finished the sentence. I would have felt that familiar, toxic surge of adrenaline, the desperate need to protect her. Now, I just felt a dull ache behind my eyes. I looked at my small, messy apartment, my safe, unremarkable life. I don't know, Jem. I have to work early tomorrow. Please, she sobbed. It was a dry, ugly sound. I haven't spoken to a person who doesn't work for the Coles in 2 months. I closed my eyes. The phantom weight of a crushed steering wheel pressed against my ribs. Don't go, my survival instinct screamed. But a colder, darker part of me wanted to see it. I needed to see the trap functioning without me in it, to prove to my lingering guilt that this was always going to be her fate. Text me the address, I said, and hung up. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a sleek, black glass needle in the financial district. The lobby smelled aggressively of lilies and ozone. A man in a tailored charcoal suit, who looked more like a mercenary than a concierge, checked my ID, scanned my bag with a handheld wand, and escorted me to a private elevator. There were no buttons inside. He swiped a keycard, and the doors glided shut with a heavy, airtight thud. When the elevator opened directly into the apartment, the silence was the first thing that hit me. It was absolute. There was no hum of a refrigerator, no distant traffic, no neighbors walking upstairs. It was the silence of a vacuum. Harper. I stepped onto the gleaming white marble floor. Gemma stood at the end of a long hallway. She was 7 months pregnant now, her belly a hard, heavy sphere, beneath a blush pink silk robe. The robe was gorgeous, probably hand-stitched, but on her pale, exhausted frame, it looked remarkably like a hospital gown. I walked toward her. The temperature in the apartment was perfectly regulated, but the air felt thin. Hey, I said. She threw her arms around me. She smelled of expensive, unscented medical-grade lotion and fear. She was trembling. I patted her back slowly, feeling the sharp ridge of her spine. She had lost weight everywhere, except her stomach. Look at this place, she whispered, pulling away and gesturing to the cavernous living room. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a dizzying view of the gray city below. The furniture was all sharp angles, white leather, and brushed steel. Nothing looked comfortable. Nothing looked like a home. It's incredible, I lied, keeping my face smooth. You hit the jackpot, Jem. She let out a hollow laugh, wrapping her arms around her belly. Right, the jackpot. She led me to a massive marble kitchen island. A pristine plate of steamed vegetables and plain quinoa sat on the counter. My lunch, she muttered bitterly. Mrs. Cole has the private chef weigh my proteins. They say the baby needs optimal nutrition. They're taking care of you. I repeated the mantra. I pulled out a heavy metal stool and sat down. Gemma leaned over the island, her voice dropping to a frantic whisper. Harper, they won't let me leave. I tried to go to a bookstore last week, just to get out. 2 guards followed me into the store, stood behind me, and escorted me back to the car after 10 minutes. I'm suffocating. You're carrying a billionaire's heir, I said practically, examining my chipped fingernails. You're a high-value target. Of course, they have security. But it's not security against other people, she hissed, her eyes wide and bloodshot. It's security against me. Preston barely looks at me when he's here. He sleeps in the guest wing. And his mother, Harper, she brought in an interior designer for the nursery. I tried to pick out a crib, a normal, wooden crib. Mrs. Cole threw the catalog in the trash. She said, cold children don't sleep in common ling timber. I felt a sickening wave of déjà vu. I remembered sitting in a police station, trying to file a restraining order on her behalf against Mrs. Cole, only for the desk sergeant to laugh in my face. I remembered the defamation lawsuit they hit me with 3 days later. You're marrying into royalty, Gemma, I said. I kept my voice devoid of pity. Pity was a rope she would use to hang us both. You knew there would be rules. You wanted the trust funds. You wanted the Birkin. She looked at me, a flash of genuine hatred cutting through the exhaustion in her eyes. You think I deserve this? I think you made a business transaction, I replied quietly. And the Coles take their business very seriously. She recoiled, wrapping the silk robe tighter around her frail shoulders. The silence of the penthouse rushed back in, filling the space between us. I stood up. The marble floor was freezing through the soles of my boots. I have to go, I told her. My shift starts early. Gemma didn't walk me back to the elevator. She just stood by the island, staring at her plate of measured quinoa. As the heavy doors slid shut, separating me from her gilded cage, I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My hands were shaking. I shoved them deep into my coat pockets and watched the floor numbers plummet toward the ground, dragging me back down to the real world. January brought ice storms that turned the city grid into a fractured, dangerous mess. I got a promotion at work, a modest bump to junior project manager, and celebrated by buying a $15 bottle of red wine and a block of sharp cheddar. I was sitting on my worn, ugly plaid sofa, wrapped in a fleece blanket, watching bad reality television. The heater was clanking rhythmically. It was a Friday night. I was safe. I was anonymous. At 11:42 p.m., the intercom on my wall buzzed with a harsh, electric screech. I spilled wine on my sweatpants. I froze, staring at the small, yellowed plastic box on the wall near my door. Nobody visited me here. Nobody knew my new address except my landlord and my employer. It buzzed again. A long, desperate, continuous press. I set my wine glass on the coffee table. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I walked to the door and pressed the talk button. "Who is it?" I demanded. "Harper, let me in. Please, let me in." It was Gemma, but she sounded completely unhinged. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded my veins. In my first life, I had hidden her in my apartment for 2 days before Preston's private investigators kicked the door off its hinges. They had dragged her out screaming, and one of the men had shoved me so hard I hit my head on the radiator. I still remembered the taste of the blood. I pressed the intercom button. "How did you find me?" "I bribed one of the maids for your address," she cried through the static. "I took a cab. I slipped out the service elevator. Harper, they're going to find me. You have to buzz me in." I looked at the deadbolt on my door. The brass was cold. I rested my forehead against the cheap wood. "Turn away," I told myself. "If you let her in, the countdown starts again." I pressed the button. "I'm coming down." I didn't buzz her up. I grabbed my heavy winter coat, shoved my keys into my pocket, and walked down 3 flights of stairs. Gemma was standing in the narrow, poorly lit vestibule of my building. She looked terrifying. She was 8 months pregnant, massive and swollen. She was wearing a thin trench coat over pajamas, shivering violently, her bare feet shoved into unlaced designer sneakers. Her hair was a matted, tangled mess. When she saw me through the glass door, she threw herself against it. I unlocked it and stepped out, quickly pulling the door shut behind me so she couldn't get inside. The icy wind howled down the street, biting at my exposed neck. "Why won't you let me up?" she sobbed, grabbing the lapels of my coat. Her fingers felt like claws. "Hide me. You have to hide me." "I'm not hiding you, Gemma," I said, my voice hard, projecting a calm I absolutely did not feel. "What are you doing? They'll call the police. You're breaching your contracts." "The contracts!" she shrieked, pulling a crumpled stack of papers from her coat pocket. She shoved them against my chest. "Look at them. I finally found the whole file in Preston's home office. I picked the lock. I didn't take the papers. I let them fall to the frozen concrete between us. I already knew what they said." "Read them," she begged, dropping to her knees. She frantically scrambled to pick up the wet, slush-covered pages, holding one up to the dim streetlight. "Clause 14, Harper. Postpartum care and psychiatric supervision. It says that due to my familial history of mental instability, which is a lie, my family is fine. I agree to a mandatory, indefinite stay at a private wellness facility in Switzerland, immediately following the birth." She looked up at me. Her face was streaked with mascara and melted snow. "They're going to take my baby," she whispered, the reality finally crushing the last of her delusions. "They're going to lock me in a psych ward on another continent, and I'll never see my child. I'm just an incubator." Looking down at her, a profound, sickening wave of grief washed over me. Not just for her, but for the girl I used to be. The girl who had died, trying to scream this exact truth into her deaf ears. "I told you," I said softly. The wind carried the words away almost immediately. "What?" she gasped, clutching her stomach as a contraction, or perhaps just panic, rippled through her. "I told you to be careful." I lied. I hadn't told her anything this time, but the memory of my past life bled through. "I asked you if you knew what those contracts were. You said it was a formality. You said I was jealous." "I was stupid," she wailed, grabbing my ankles. "I was an idiot. Please, Harper, I have money. Look." She fumbled with her pocket and pulled out a handful of diamond jewelry. Bracelets, earrings, her engagement ring. "We can sell this. We can buy plane tickets. We can go to Mexico. You're my best friend. Save me." I stared down at the glittering stones resting in her pale, trembling hand. Millions of dollars of coal money. Stolen coal money. Touching those diamonds would be a death sentence. I slowly reached down and peeled her fingers off my ankles. I stepped back. "No," I said. Gemma froze. The manic energy drained out of her, leaving only a hollow, echoing void. "No, I can't save you, Gemma. Nobody can." My voice broke, betraying my forced detachment. I swallowed hard, forcing the iron back into my spine. "If I help you, they will destroy me. They will freeze my accounts, ruin my career, and if that doesn't work, they'll just have someone run me off the road. They own the game. We are just pawns." "You're abandoning me," she whispered. "You abandoned yourself the second you peed on that stick and saw dollar signs instead of a child," I said brutally. Headlights swept across the brick wall of my building. A massive black SUV turned the corner at the end of the street, moving slowly, prowling. "They're here," I said, stepping back toward the glass door. Gemma turned, seeing the headlights cut through the falling snow. She let out a whimpering sound, the sound of an animal caught in a snare, realizing the hunter has arrived. She looked back at me, her eyes dead, devoid of hope. "I hate you," she whispered. "I know," I said. I slipped inside my building and let the heavy door lock behind me. I stood in the dark vestibule, watching through the glass. The SUV pulled up to the curb. Two men in dark coats got out. They didn't yell. They didn't run. They simply walked up to Gemma, picked her up by her arms, and guided her into the back seat. She didn't fight them. Her spirit was already broken. The SUV drove away, leaving nothing but tire tracks in the dirty snow and a few scattered wet pages of a contract she never should have signed. February arrived with gray skies and biting cold. I went to work. I drank coffee. I submitted reports. I slept 8 hours a night. I had meticulously scrubbed my life clean of anything extraordinary, and it felt like heaven. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The office was quiet, save for the rhythmic clicking of keyboards and the low hum of the ventilation system. I was staring at an Excel spreadsheet when a notification popped up in the corner of my monitor. It was a breaking news alert from a major entertainment site. Billionaire tech heir Preston Cole welcomes baby boy. I stopped typing. The cursor blinked steadily on the screen. I clicked the link. The page loaded, dominated by a high-resolution photo of Preston Cole standing outside a private hospital. He looked immaculately groomed, wearing a navy suit, smiling a practiced, aristocratic smile for the cameras. Beside him stood his mother, Mrs. Cole, holding a bundle wrapped in a ridiculously expensive cashmere blanket. I scanned the article. A joyous day for the Cole dynasty as they welcome the new heir. Weighing 7 lbs, 4 Oz. A spokesperson for the family stated that mother and baby are both doing well. The family requests privacy during this time. There was no name given for the mother. She wasn't in the photograph. She was a ghost in her own story. My stomach churned, a sour mix of acid and stale coffee. I closed the tab, minimized the browser, and forced myself to finish the spreadsheet. When I got home that evening, the apartment was dark. I didn't turn on the main lights, just the small lamp on my desk. I dropped my keys in the ceramic bowl by the door. The familiar clink grounded me. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. There was a voicemail notification. The caller ID was a sequence of international numbers. Switzerland. I sat down on the floor, leaning my back against the wall. I pulled my knees to my chest and pressed the phone to my ear. I hit play. For the first 10 seconds, there was nothing but the sound of heavy, ragged breathing. Then, a voice. Harper. It was Gemma, but it didn't sound like her. The manic edge, the arrogance, the defensive spite, it was all gone. Her voice was flat, heavily medicated, and slurred. "They took him," she whispered. "I woke up, and my stomach was empty. They didn't even let me hear him cry." A dull, rhythmic sound echoed in the background. It sounded like someone walking down a long, tiled corridor. "I'm in a room," she continued, her voice drifting, losing focus. "The walls are soft. There's a window, but it won't open. It just looks out at mountains. They give me pills in little paper cups. If I don't swallow them, they hold my nose." Tears pricked the corners of my eyes. Hot, angry tears. I hated the Coles. I hated the world that allowed them to exist. And God help me, a part of me still loved the foolish, greedy girl who used to be my roommate. "You were right," Gemma's voice crackled through the speaker. "About all of it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Harper. It's so cold here." The line went dead. I sat in the dim light of my apartment for a long time, the phone still pressed to my ear. I listened to the dial tone, the monotonous buzz of a disconnected connection. In another life, I would have hired a lawyer. I would have gone to the press. I would have screamed until my throat bled. And then I would have died on a rainy street, crushed into twisted metal, leaving her exactly where she was right now. Anyway, I pulled the phone away from my ear. I looked at the screen. Delete voicemail? My thumb hovered over the red button. My hand was shaking. I thought about the smell of old pennies in my mouth. I thought about the absolute finality of death. I had been given a second chance, not to be a hero, but to be a survivor. I pressed the button. The voicemail vanished. I stood up. My knees popped. I walked into my small kitchen, turned on the faucet, and splashed cold water on my face. The water was real. The cheap towel I dried my face with was real. The smell of the leftover garlic pasta in my fridge was real. I grabbed a pan, set it on the stove, and turned the dial. The blue flame ignited with a soft whoosh. I poured a splash of olive oil into the pan. I was going to make dinner. I was going to eat it. I was going to go to sleep. And tomorrow, I was going to wake up and go to work. I was alive. Gemma was a ghost. And Preston Cole had his air. The universe had course-corrected, brutal and indifferent, as always. I watched the oil shimmer in the pan, waiting for it to get hot. 2 years evaporated into the gray concrete of the city. Time didn't heal anything. It just buried it under layers of routine and mundane survival. I was 26 now. I had a mid-level position at a logistics firm, a 401k with a modest employer match, and a slightly larger apartment on the east side that smelled faintly of old radiator iron and the lavender detergent I used to scrub the floors. I bought my groceries on Sundays. I watered my single, stubborn pothos plant on Wednesdays. I lived a quiet, hermetically sealed existence. Nobody bumped into me on the street and tried to kill me. Nobody served me with subpoenas. My blood pressure remained perfectly, painfully average. Preston Cole, on the other hand, was everywhere. His face plastered the covers of business magazines stacked in the checkout aisles of my local supermarket. He was always wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit, holding his son, a blonde, blue-eyed toddler named William. The headlines were always some variation of the same nauseating PR spin. Preston Cole, the billionaire, single father. How Tech's golden boy balances boardrooms and bedtimes. A tragic battle with mental illness. Why Preston Cole raises his heir alone. I was standing in line at a bodega on a suffocatingly humid July afternoon when I saw the latest issue of Modern Wealth. Preston was on the cover, gazing lovingly at the boy. The caption read, "The Cole legacy secures its future after heartbreaking family tragedy." A sour, metallic taste flooded the back of my throat. I stared at Preston's immaculate, arrogant smile. The public narrative was a masterpiece of corporate engineering. According to the Cole family's official press releases, Gemma had suffered a catastrophic, irreversible break from reality following William's birth. They painted her as a tragic figure, a fragile woman who had been utterly consumed by severe postpartum psychosis. They claimed she was receiving world-class care at an undisclosed sanctuary, and that Preston, the noble, heartbroken patriarch, had stepped up to shoulder the burden alone. The media devoured it. The public adored him. Women on social media threw themselves at his digital feet, praising his dedication. They didn't know about Clause 14. They didn't know about the black SUV, or the men in dark coats, or the pills in paper cups. I paid for my sparkling water and walked out into the stifling heat. The asphalt radiated heat through the thin soles of my canvas shoes. A garbage truck rumbled past, kicking up a cloud of dust and the stench of rotting food, but I barely registered it. I didn't want to save Gemma. I had already made peace with my refusal to die for her greed. But as I walked home, the sheer, unchallenged audacity of Preston Cole began to itch beneath my skin. It was a slow, crawling sensation, like a spider trapped under a glass. He had won entirely. He had purchased a human incubator, discarded the husk, and bought the applause of the world with the leftover change. I reached my apartment, locked the deadbolt, and set my water